welcome back into the Lions 24/7 podcast. It is an action-packed week here in Happy Valley. We are with you, episode 1 of this week. 3 episodes coming your way. We'll drop another on Friday early morning to give you a full preview of the blue-white game in Beaver Stadium, the ins and outs on what we're looking for from a player perspective, personnel perspective, and additionally, we'll have Tyler Calvaruso on to break down what that event means from a recruiting standpoint. There are plenty of prospects heading to campus for that matchup. Additionally, we have a lot to get into, though, from what we saw on the practice field, heard on the practice field on Tuesday evening. It was our last look at Penn State spring practices. Until that blue-white game, it was our 5th look overall since early March. And to help me break that down is Daniel Gallen right now from Lions247.com. Daniel, welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Tyler. It's almost here. After 5 weeks of practice, we'll finally get some eyes on these guys in Beaver Stadium from above. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'd be fun to be back in the press box. You can catch our coverage on Saturday, starting in the morning, going all the way through the afternoon into the evening on Saturday. We will be back with a post-game podcast as well when we get a chance to sit down. Not like our usual post-game podcast, because this will be kind of just a glorified practice analysis, but it'll be fun because, as Daniel referenced, it's a different vantage point for us. Not only do we have the eye in the sky kind of view up in the press box, but we also have a chance to see an entire session of Penn State practice versus the 10 or so minutes that we get during these viewing windows on Tuesday afternoons. But Daniel, you and I have a lot to dive into. After us, we're going to talk a lot about recruiting. There's a new key crystal ball pick in for Penn State and a commitment date that is set for Thursday this week. National recruiting analyst Tom Loy is going to hop on the podcast here after Daniel, break down his crystal ball pick in favor of Penn State, talk about the quarterback situation for the Nittany Lions. He has a couple in-person evaluations of Nittany Lions quarterback commit Beckham Kritza to share with us. And we'll also get into a bunch of Penn State targets in the 2025 class from across the country. But as I said, we begin with our focus on Tuesday evening. And Daniel, I mean, there was a couple of years ago where we were wondering what the spring game was even going to look like. And ultimately, it wasn't really a game of any sort, because the offensive line numbers were so low. Depending on what day you would go into practice back in 2022, there might be 7, 8, 9 guys available maximum, it seemed, on the offensive line. And they weren't able to really hold a true scrimmage that year. Took a step forward last year. James Franklin was asked about it after practice yesterday, and he told us that, yes, the anticipated setup for Saturday is a scrimmage. And that's great to hear. I think everybody wants to see that. I think the players probably want to participate in that. The fans want to experience it in Beaver Stadium. We in the press box want to analyze that. But you looked at the offensive line. You were looking at offense on Tuesday. I was over on the defensive portion of the practice field outside. And there are still some interesting dynamics in play there. They're not lacking enough bodies to go out and have a scrimmage, but it's a little bit of a mixed bag for Phil Stratwine. Why don't you describe what you saw?
Yeah, I think coming into the spring, we knew that we weren't going to see Drew Shelton there. Garrett Sexton, the early enrollee on the offensive line, he was another one who James Franklin singled out before the spring as unlikely to participate in spring. And at this point, it's the last week, and we haven't seen either of those guys. But additionally, on Tuesday night when we were out there, we didn't see Sal Wormley. We didn't see JB Nelson. Those are 2 of your starters on the offensive line from last year. And so that made for some pretty interesting combinations, I think. When you look at this offensive line, we got to see Cooper Cousins working at guard next to Nick Dawkins, which I don't think we'd seen yet this year. We've seen a lot of Javen Williams at left tackle, him getting a lot of work over there. And then we've continued to see Anthony Donka in that right tackle spot ahead of Nolan Rucci. I think that's something that has been very, very intriguing since the Beach Bowl. Something that has really been on our radar and something that we've really noticed. So I think that when you talk about what we've seen from the offensive line this spring, I'd say that when you narrow down the constants, I'd say the 2 have been Nick Dawkins and Anthony Donka at their respective positions. Not having Shelton, I think it kind of makes it a little bit harder to hone in on that left tackle spot. And then we knew that Venga Ioane and JB Nelson were sharing a lot of time last year to begin with. So it's kind of wait and see there. But we do know that JB Nelson has that left tackle versatility. So him not being there has opened some things up, and it was interesting. Last night, I know that we're still however many months away from the West Virginia game, and a lot can happen. But I thought this was a unique group. I don't know if it's necessarily the one you would want to go out there on the field with Morgantown, given some of the relative inexperience there and the guys that weren't there. But it's an intriguing group of players, and I think it's another kind of testament to what we've talked about and how the depth of this room has really developed over the past couple of years.
Quick check, 143 days until kickoff for the 2024 season. So some time for them to figure this thing out. But I think you mentioned some constants there. Nick Dawkins at center, a guy who spoke with media after practice on Tuesday, feeling very confident as our teammates and coaches in his ability to take that role and run with it and be a really big-time leader. He called himself the quarterback of the offensive line. That's how he views himself. Could end up as a team captain this summer. But the guy who's pushing him at center and maybe pushing folks at guard now and playing in place of Sal Wormley on the field yesterday at right guard is Cooper Cousins. And he's a guy that we have known for a long time, watching him in the camp circuit, evaluating his senior high school film, and a guy who was the first committed player of this 2024 class. We knew he'd show up ready to compete. I don't think we knew that he'd show up and ready to deliver this kind of sustained spring camp to start things off, because James Franklin talked about him coming in really hot, getting a lot of buzz going. And then, like a lot of freshmen, like a lot of transfers, even your first semester with the program, you're trying to play catch up. Everything's getting installed and it's day to day to day. It's piling up. He said Cooper Cousins hit a little bit of a lull, but he has broken through that now. And now, again, it's kind of full steam ahead. And Franklin alluded to the fact that they had been working him a lot at center. That's where he's got a lot of comfort level in. That's where the focus was initially when he got to campus in January. But now they've kind of expanded his offensive line horizons a bit over to guard work. And you think about what that might mean if JB Nelson were called upon to play tackle. That takes the guard out of the equation. Alex Birchmeier is in his second year on campus after being a top prospect in the 2023 class, but he's been working with reserves. He's been working with backups. We don't really have him figured out. So you've got a sixth-year guy in Sal Wormley. You've got a redshirt sophomore in Venga Ioane that you really like, and then you've got Nick Dawkins in the center spot. But that interior, all of a sudden, I'm looking around and at your notes yesterday, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I know Donnie Harbor is a guy they really like, but is he going to show up in the summer and really push as a true freshman in his first camp to be a two-deep kind of a figure or playable figure in year one? That might be asking a lot at that position. So I wonder now, as you kind of look ahead here and forecast what it might look like in August, what does the interior plan look like? Is it a situation where Nick Dawkins has kind of firmed up his status as the first team center, and you want Cooper Cousins to maybe push a guard for their job, or maybe have Cooper Cousins push for a rotational role like we've seen in the past with Penn State? Or does Cousins continue to chip away at center? And he can do both, certainly. But I just wonder if, because of what we discussed with the tackle versus interior depth and the bodies that are there and the caliber of player and the experience, might it be worth exploring, some tinkering a little bit on that interior? Because all of a sudden you have a guy like Sal Wormley step to the side for one day, and you've got walk-ons on your two deep at guard. It kind of put it in a glaring perspective for me yesterday, Daniel, in a way that I wasn't really anticipating. And part of this is because we have had JB Nelson kind of on the perimeter in our mind this spring. Drew Shelton comes back, and they say, JB, you're back to guard. Go battle it out with Venga. Then that makes me feel a little better about guard spot. But right now, it's taking Cooper Cousins from maybe a luxury piece on the offensive line to maybe a guy that's going to have to contribute in year one. And it sounds like there's confidence that he can do that if called upon.
Yeah, I think that it's a reminder that offensive line is one of those positions where you can never have too many of them, and that depth is, on paper, depth can look really good, like something can look really deep, but you just take away one guy and the perception of it can really, really change. I think also from a bigger picture in terms of spring ball, it kind of gives you an appreciation for more of the walk-ons, guys like Ian Harvey and Addison Penn, because those are reasons why, Penn State, will be able to have a good spring game. I think that 2 years ago, that was a little bit underrated. Like, there were a lot of injuries and guys were banged up, but some of the walk-ons who had been around for a while entered the transfer portal, which thinned that depth a little bit more on the offensive line. And we, I think a couple of years ago, we got a really emphatic answer from Phil Troutline about how he feels about those guys. But going back to what they have, I mean, I think that Cooper Cousins is the type of player that, if he's ready to go, you're going to get him ready at any position where he could, theoretically see the field. I mean, I think that there hasn't really been any hesitation about his ability to come in early. And I think that that's something too for Saturday in the blue white game. We're finally going to see what he looks like against some of these guys. What does he look like maybe against Keziah Izzard, Devon Lees, Zane Durant? We know what Penn State has at defensive tackle, a bunch of really older veteran guys, Hakeem Beamon, Devon, even Smith Vilbert, who's cross-trained. They're all 6th-year guys. And Cooper Cousins, a early enrollee freshman. It's going to be an 18-year-old against some 23 and 24-year-olds. And I think that'll give us a nice glimpse here of what Penn State has. But I agree with you. I think that we were probably kind of looking at him as that luxury piece. But if he can be in the 2 deep and Penn State can put him in a position where if they need him, he can contribute, I think that's huge for them.
There's been feedback from Penn State facilities about Cooper Cousins being one of, if not maybe the most impressive freshman offensive lineman to show up on campus and be prepared to compete in practice. James Franklin told us on Tuesday night that he expects him to be prepared to compete in fall camp. And a lot of this process in March and April is about laying the foundation so you have your footing when you get back on the practice field in August as a freshman. But I'll tell you what, you don't stop feeding him those snaps at center, because he certainly seems, if not competing for the starting job this year, as the heir apparent at that spot at center. But you really could see him work into that guard conversation more and more, depending on how Phil Troutline is feeling about those 2 spots and what he thinks Cooper Cousins can bring to the field for this team. He's talked about all the time, finding the best 5. Sometimes that involves 7 or 8 guys being part of the game plan. And maybe Cooper Cousins is a part of that game plan when this team kicks off its actual season in late August, versus having to work his way into the conversation deeper into the season. Some things to keep in mind there with Cooper Cousins. And we've been wondering about Abdul Carter and his process. He's a guy that we haven't been able to catch up with in a media session since he made the move from linebacker to defensive end. But we've talked to a lot of people about him, and James Franklin is certainly one of them. His full comments from Tuesday night on Abdul Carter were optimistic. I think they were certainly spoke a lot about how he feels like Abdul Carter is trending. He said, quote, "That transition has probably gone better and faster than I thought it would. It's a different world up there on the defensive line. Sounds good, but it's a major difference. He has transitioned very, very well to it. He's been physical. He's been explosive off the edge. Still some things he's learning in his transition, but again, better and faster than anticipated." So this was a first-team All-Big Ten linebacker last year. The year before, he was a freshman All-American. So I think it's difficult for any of us to comprehend the possibility that he goes from being a central figure of your defensive plan, a guy who played more snaps than any defender last year, to just a piece, to just a component at the defensive end position. They want to ensure that an athlete, a player of this caliber, is at the forefront of what they want to do defensively, but they don't want to throw him out there if he's not prepared. And it sounds like the steps forward have been taking place since January. Is the guy who was the catalyst for the decision. Abdul Carter, pushed for this move to defensive end. And, it seems like by the time we get through the next 4.5 months and this team enters its first game week of the year, that Abdul Carter is going to go from, getting his feet wet to someone who's ready to dive in head first and attack opposing quarterbacks.
I thought that coming into the spring, James Franklin did a good job of sort of pumping the brakes a little bit.
Absolutely.
It's easy to be excited about this kind of move. And I think that a lot of people you just sort of assume like, oh yeah, you go from linebacker where you have all these other responsibilities and now you're just rushing the passer. Like, yeah, of course it'll be a smooth transition. But, it seemed like James Franklin was kind of, we'll wait and see a little bit. And now that we're on kind of the other side of spring, we're getting some of that more positive feedback from Franklin about Abdul. A little bit more explicit praise for how that move has gone. I thought that Denai Dennis Sutton, offered a little bit of insight Tuesday night while we were talking to him, and he was kind of mostly like Abdul Carter is his own player. They kind of know who he is as an athlete. I think Denai seemed very, very confident in what Carter would be able to do. But he said that his quote was, everything we've been pretty much doing. Wait, where is it? He said that everything's been translating to the team reps. Quote, out there, he was just killing the guys in the half line Skelly pass pro. He was literally unblockable for like 4 straight plays, which was crazy. But yeah, he's adjusted really well. So yeah, I think to kind of hear that from Denai, who, is kind of, he's a measured speaker. He's really good with us, but yeah, I think that he's someone that when he says something like that, you kind of perk up a little bit, and you're kind of like, okay, that's what they're seeing behind the scenes from him. I think that James Franklin, he's talked about it in other realms of his program in terms of under promising and over delivering, and I think that this is something too that he was doing here for probably a variety of reasons. But I think that now that we've kind of come out on the other side, we're sort of kind of getting that this is going how some of us, or a lot of us, probably thought it would coming into spring.
There's a bunch of stuff we'll be watching closely from the press box on Saturday because it will be our only chance to see these kind of things until August and maybe beyond. But Abdul Carter and what he looks like off the edge, what he looks like with some of that get off, because we've seen some of that in the practice field, and the pieces are there. But what does it look like when the ball snapped, the quarterback's dropping back, what have you, and it's live football, or at least as live as it can get in this kind of a scrimmage setting? Really, really curious to see what we get out of Abdul Carter, how much we get out of Abdul Carter this Saturday. And it's going to be a topic of conversation all season. I know nationally, a lot of folks are really buzzy about this move for Abdul Carter, what it could mean for Penn State's defense, what it could mean for his NFL draft stock moving ahead. But I think here locally, those of us who are on the day-to-day covering the beat, we have really heard the refrain from James Franklin about, baby steps. We'll get there in September and August 31st, but we got things to do in March and April and May and June along the way. And so far, so good, it sounds like, with Abdul Carter's process. We also heard from AJ Harris on Tuesday night. He's a guy that showed up to campus in January as part of this transfer class, spent 1 season with the Georgia Bulldogs, signed with them when they were the reigning national champions. He was a 5-star cornerback recruit out of Alabama when he's picked Georgia. Everybody in the country essentially was after this young man. He played in 8 games last year, burned his red shirt, but played very seldomly on defense, especially after the month of September. Ultimately hit the transfer portal in mid-December, and here he is. And it's a room that, Jalen Kimber's been someone we've discussed. You caught up with him last week. He started for the Florida Gators last year. Now he's in this cornerback room. And AJ Harris, just a couple years removed from being one of the most prominent prospects on the defensive side of the football across the country, really has steadily, it feels like, from winter workouts, the first half of spring ball, and now the end of spring ball, the trajectory has really been there, pointing up the entire time from everything we've gathered.
Definitely. It was really, really good to finally get to meet him, finally get to hear from him. We've heard from all the major transfers over the past 2 weeks, and I think that AJ Harris just comes off as a very impressive player, especially in the media setting. I think that Mark Brennan has the full video up on Lions 24/7, and I would recommend people go watch that. And Harris just kind of struck me as being very affable, taking all the questions, offering some good insight, really allowing us to learn about him. But I thought that James Franklin kind of dove into what Harris is as a player and how he could affect that defense a little bit. He talked about the competitiveness that he brings and kind of how he understands what it takes. You assume that coming from a program like Georgia, and we've heard the refrain a bunch of times from James Franklin, from Chuck Losey, that these transfers, when they come in, they know why they're there. They're more strictly business about things. But I think that you look at what Franklin said about Harris. He called him unusual, physical, He has the ability to play a bunch of different positions in that secondary. We've heard a lot about him at the Lions spot, along with Jalen Reed. And it's just going to be interesting, I think, how they use him. I think that he can be a little bit of a chess piece for this defense, for the secondary, which I think helps, especially after losing guys like Johnny Dixon and Daquan Hardy, who you can move around a little bit.
Yeah, AJ Harris, he's a guy that we expected to hear a bunch about this spring. When you have a 5-star pedigree and you spend your first year with Georgia, you think the guy's going to come to campus and make some noise. That has been the case. One name in that cornerback room that we weren't necessarily expecting to hear a lot about coming out of spring camp, and that changed in a big way Tuesday, is Aldavian Collins. He arrived here last May, spent his freshman year in 2022 at Mississippi State, stuck around with the Bulldogs program through last year's spring schedule, and then decided to hit the transfer portal. He is out of Georgia as well, and he's somebody who had a nice collection of Power 5 offers in high school, but he was a 3-star prospect. We're talking about kind of a different prospect profile, certainly, than a former 5-star guy or a top 100 prospect like Jalen Kimber was, or a top 24/7 recruit like Cam Miller was, the guy who's got the most experience in that cornerback room. Relatively under the radar in that Southeast region in terms of the cornerback spot. And he spends a year at Mississippi State, comes up to Penn State, encounters a really crowded and competitive cornerback room, and ends up only seeing 8 defensive snaps last year across 4 games. A lot of his work came on special teams, didn't do much of the cornerback spot. Lo and behold, here we are 5 weeks into spring practice in a room that we know has a lot of different pieces. As we said, AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber coming in. You've got Elliott Washington, Zion Tracy, burning red shirts last year, getting some extended action late in the year. And then Cam Miller, who's played a lot of football for this team. And what we hear from Terry Smith, the cornerbacks coach, in his 11th year with the Nittany Lions, is that Aldavian Collins has been the most impressive guy in that room this spring. Big statement from Terry Smith. And here's what he had to say about Collins. Quote, Aldavian has made the biggest gain of anyone in our room. From where he was at the end of last season to now, he is night and day different player. He's the most consistent guy out there. He's been putting days together, and his consistency has just been incredible. Of all the guys in the room, he's had the best spring. And we had heard a little bit about Aldavian Collins and him making up some ground this year. But quite frankly, when we were kind of wrapping our heads around the depth chart, who's going to be involved at cornerback, he was a bit of an afterthought for most of the winter, especially once we factored in Harris and we factored in Kimber. And Smith said something interesting, Terry Smith, when I asked why, why is it night and day difference from, last December to where we are now in April. And he explained that he felt like psychologically, when those 3 guys departed the program, Daquan Hardy, Johnny Dixon, and Kalen King, guys who played 1,500 snaps last year combined, he says that all of a sudden everything's there for the taking. There's no returning starter. Every opportunity is there to seize. There's different roles at the cornerback spot that are there to seize. And he just says Collins has clearly taken to that. He says, if that's the case, then great. If that's not the case, whatever it is working. So, man, I got to say, this is one of the more surprising developments to come out of this camp, is just how highly regarded Aldavian Collins is right now by the staff, and most importantly, by his position coach as a redshirt sophomore.
Jalen Kimber deserves a lot of credit for opening that door for us. Last week when we talked to him, I asked him about which of the younger cornerbacks in the room were standing out to him, and Aldavian Collins was the first one that he mentioned. He called him very intentional. He called him aggressive. He said he's a dog. He's going to fight to the finish. I think that that's sort of what the intangible traits that you want to hear from someone. I do think that that's really interesting what Terry Smith said about the kind of the psychological part and the approach. We were talking about it last year too, when you had those 3 cornerbacks and you're trying to figure out where the snaps are going to come. For guys like Zion Tracy and Elliott Washington and even Cam Miller, who'd already played a lot of football at that point. So I think that Aldavian Collins certainly changes the equation there a little bit. I think that you talk about guys who transfer in and they're kind of ready to go after having the college experience, someone like an AJ Harris. And Aldavian Collins is kind of the one size doesn't fit all with transfers. I went back, I just checked, and I think that he was listed at 165 pounds on
Yep.
Mississippi State's roster. He's listed at 179 now. It's another feather in the cap for Chuck Losey and the Penn State strength and conditioning department. So some of these transfers, James Franklin has kind of laid out their philosophies where certain guys, they're looking for that instant impact. You think about Arnold Ebiketie a couple years ago. Julian Fleming fits that description this year. And then you bring in the developmental guys. Johnny Dixon was one of those where you brought him in and you had a 2 and 3 year plan. Davian Collins fits that mold too. He was a redshirt freshman last year. This is only his 3rd year of college football, and he's got a couple of years left. So we'll see how that actually looks. But I think that I guess it won't be a surprise if you look on the field and see number 29 on Saturday. I think that that's not a mistake. That's not Storm Duck coming back again. That's someone that has Terry Smith's attention.
Remember, Storm Duck came through last year out of North Carolina, spent spring ball with Penn State, then hit the exit door real fast, ended up at Louisville, and they swiftly brought in Davian Collins. Duck was a one-and-done situation as a grad transfer, whereas Collins, as you said, multi-year kind of approach where you want to really sink your teeth into this and develop a guy at the back end, and it seems like they are heading in that direction. And oh, by the way, Terry Smith, really happy about what he's gotten out of those 2 freshmen thus far, the former teammates down in Jacksonville, Florida, and John Mitchell and Antoine Belgrave Shorter. He says he thinks they're going to be on the field in the near future for this team. So as he said, they lose 3 likely NFL draft picks, and the stock for some of those guys is tough to read right now, but Dixon, Hardy, and King all gone. But Smith genuinely believes here in April that he may have a deeper cornerback room, though, in 2024. And he says that's a challenge for him. It's a challenge that these guys have presented. And he says that his perspective of this room and what it can be is much different and much improved from where it was in day 1 of spring ball. So it sounds like that position unit has really shown up on the field through the first 12 practices of their spring schedule and delivered in a big way, and has their coach thinking about a lot of possibilities of not just starters, but combinations and different utilizations for skill sets. So something to monitor there at cornerback, where it's going to be competitive. There's not going to be enough snaps for everybody to play big roles. And so something to monitor in the months ahead. We did hear from Franklin on Deny Dennis Sutton. I know you heard from Deny Dennis Sutton in general on Tuesday night, but I wanted to kind of tee you up by going back to what James Franklin says. Deny hasn't really been all that discussed, I would say, this spring, because he feels like one of the known commodities on a defense that has some changing parts, has new leadership. There's just been other things to get to. But James Franklin kind of, the question brought it to the forefront, but Franklin talking about Deny Dennis Sutton, really just gushes about him. And it's been going back to when they signed the young man, but Franklin lauded his intensity day to day on the practice field. He says at 270 pounds now, he's an extremely physical presence, and he says they expect him to have a really big year. He summarized it by finishing it with this sentence when he talked about Deny Dennis Sutton for a few minutes, for about 40 seconds or so. He said, "He just plays the game you want it played." And I think every step of the way we're charting this young man's process. He had Georgia and Alabama hats on the table when he picked Penn State. It was one of the most monumental wins, I think, from the recruiting trail for James Franklin since he's been there. And Deny Dennis Sutton came through in 2022, burned his red shirt, got some work. Last year, steps up and becomes not just a figure in the rotation, but at the end of the day, because Chop Robinson's sidelined, because of some of the stuff they do with Adiza Isaac, and just because of the way they work guys in and out, he led all defensive ends in game snaps last year as a sophomore. And now I think, Daniel, the expectation is for him to go from role player as a freshman, essentially a guy who's ready to start and does make starts as a sophomore, to now all Big Ten caliber, booming NFL draft stock kind of a year for a former 5-star recruit. And what James Franklin is saying and the breadcrumbs that have been left for us to follow this spring certainly point toward that being the case, and a guy stepping up to the plate and eager to do so.
Definitely. I think that Deny Dennis Sutton is kind of crazy how under the radar he's flown for a lot of his career, as a 5-star who was thinking about Georgia and Alabama. Part of that has to do with arriving the same time as Chop Robinson, and Chop Robinson breaking out, having that consistent Adiza Isaac presence. And even this spring, we're always, we let off talking about Abdul Carter
Right.
moving to defensive end. But I think that Denai Dennis Sutton is in a really, really good spot. I mean, he is just a very enormous, well built, defensive end. He said that he's 6'5.5", 270 pounds. We know that our Mark Brennan thinks that the height could be there could be a couple inches left on the table there. But he talked a lot about trying to improve his technique. That was something that he was really focused on this offseason. I think we already know what his physical gifts are, and I think those have flashed during his first 2 years. But I think that he sounded like he was trying to hone in on some little things. He talked about his pad level as someone who is a little bit taller and pretty big, that he knows he needs to get lower coming off the edge. So I think that he is someone who could really be that kind of game-changing defensive end for Penn State. I think that he's someone who can create a lot of havoc there off of the edge. He said that depending on some packages, he might rush a little bit from the interior, which, given his length and his size, I think would be, I think that could potentially be disruptive for opposing guards and centers and quarterbacks. So how he's used, how Tom Allen and Deion Barnes work to unlock him a little bit, I think could be really fun when it comes down to it this fall.
I don't have a lot more to get to, but while we're on the subject of 5-stars, quick update from Ty Howell, who's the tight ends coach here at Penn State. He says Luke Reynolds showed up to campus around 215 pounds, and he's now finishing out spring practice at about 235 pounds. And if you have listened to this podcast pretty consistently, you heard from Luke Reynolds back in December, about a week or so before he enrolled here at Penn State. And that was at the forefront of the conversation for him. If he wanted to play as a freshman, he knew that he had to physically develop and put himself in a spot where the staff could be confident to send him out there to compete against Big Ten defenses when the games matter the most. And he's still got a long ways to get there. But I think the fact that he has packed on maybe close to 20 pounds or all of 20 pounds to this point, matched up with what we've heard from some of his teammates and coaches about the elite athleticism that he brings, the receiver skills that he has done. He's challenged the secondary. The part of is it, can he become a balanced tight end? How fast can that happen? Can it happen where he can go out and play this year, maybe even more than a guy like Andrew Rapplier, who I think was under 40 total snaps as a freshman last year and played in 3 games, preserved redshirt. Right now, we're still trying to figure out what tight end looks like beyond senior Tyler Warren and how guys might factor into that. But just something to pass along there, because one of those notes that I didn't want to not mention and then not get to it eventually, because I know people are really curious about Luke Reynolds, and he's in a room where he doesn't have to play right away, doesn't need to play right away. But boy, if he can be something for you in year one, that's just kind of a different element for Andy Kotelnicki to use and a different depth in that room for him to be able to check out as he puts together game plans. We did hear that it's been a physical camp. I don't know if you picked up on that, Daniel, but just speaking with players and coaches, especially as it's coming to a close, James Franklin referred to it as a very physical camp. And as a result, he says there have been some bumps and bruises. He says that will not impact the plan for scrimmage. You wonder when there's bumps and bruises, what that might mean for the staff and how they want to get out there for that glorified 15th practice. So that's good news. What we are waiting on, though, Daniel, is some clarity in terms of who's going to be out there. We had some missing players. You talked about the offensive linemen. We haven't seen Katron Allen the last couple of looks at practice. And again, reminder here before people run to the panic button, it's about a 10 to 15-minute window on Tuesdays. So the last couple Tuesdays, we didn't see Katron Allen. The Tuesday before that, not only did we see Katron Allen competing in practice, but I spent about 10 minutes speaking with Katron Allen about how excited he was regarding Andy Kotelnicki's offense. So Keandre Lambert-Smith, another player we didn't see at practice. Keon Wiley, we didn't see at practice at linebacker, a guy who's generated some buzz early on in spring ball. So we'll be keeping tabs from the press box, Daniel. Guys miss practice for all sorts of reasons. Guys get veteran treatment for all sorts of reasons. And I think when we get out there Saturday, it's going to be important to note, even if we don't see dudes, and we'll remind people on the postgame podcast, this is very much viewed as one of 15 practices. It's in a public setting. It's a celebratory thing. In a lot of ways, it's like a family reunion because you got some NFL alumni coming back to town. You've got your next recruiting class coming to town. But the long and short of it is what's happening on the field during those periods is viewed as one of 15 practices. They're not going to put all their eggs in a basket just to get a guy out there at 70% so he can carry the ball in front of a crowd. That's not the way they're going to do it. So let's just keep that in mind, Daniel. But it's always something we do generally in the press box before games. We'll be doing it again. But even if someone doesn't resurface on the field in Beaver Stadium, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're out for the entire season. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to show up in the transfer portal a week from now. But those things are in play, and we've got to be honest about that too.
Definitely. It's the college football world that we live in right now, and we'll be up in the press box on Saturday, and we'll be taking attendance before anything else.
Yeah, and James says James Franklin saying the teams will be divided as competitively as possible. They're not going to do some kind of draft or just go first team versus second team. He's basically phrased it this way: if they have 4 guys at the defensive end spot, for instance, and they feel are all quality level starters, then they're going to split those 4 guys up into 2 different teams. And so they'll take that approach position room by position room and try to put out something. Last year was a 10-0 game, if I recall correctly. So maybe we'll see a little bit more offensive fireworks from Andy Kotelnicki's squad. We'll get a chance to check that out on Saturday. We'll preview it a little bit later here in the week with our second episode, but we'll finish this conversation with a couple injury updates since we kind of went down that path a little now. You asked James Franklin for confirmation on Jackson Smolik, redshirt freshman. Report a couple of weeks ago that he was going to be missing some time from On3. Had that report. You followed up with Franklin, and he certainly confirmed it and did not give us a timeline, but phrased it as a significant injury for a player who got in for 2 snaps last year while taking redshirt.
Definitely. I think that you think about where Smolik was in his career. It's a tough time to have an injury like that. James Franklin called it significant, or confirmed it was significant. So we'll wait and see what that actually means. But in sort of the way that James Franklin talks about injuries when he does, it's obviously a long-term thing. So we'll just have to wait and see what that means for Smolik. But it means a lot for Ethan Grunkemeyer right now, who enrolled in January, got some praise a couple weeks ago from James Franklin about how he'd been flashing. You move him up to that number 3 spot behind Drew Aller and Beau Pribula. That means more reps for him, more opportunities. Depending on how long this lingers for Jackson Smolik, it could mean a spot on the travel roster for Ethan Grunkemeyer as a true freshman this fall. So we'll wait and see what this means. But I think Grunkemeyer is someone that pretty intrigued to see on Saturday. Last saw him live in Ohio back in October, and he's just a really, really impressive player. I think that we've gotten a little look at things. When you're standing next to Drew Aller and throwing a rep after Drew Aller, it looks a little bit different. But from what we've seen from Grunkemeyer, I mean, he can sling it. He looks a little bit bigger. And I think that he's someone that is probably going to get a pretty good opportunity on Saturday.
And the other one I wanted to get to, and we won't see him on Saturday. We haven't seen him during spring ball. We didn't see him last season, but it sounds like we may see him later this year. Alonzo Ford, who came to campus last May as a transfer from Old Dominion. He was a 2-year starter for former Penn State assistant Ricky Ronnie down there with the Monarchs. Got a couple seasons of eligibility. He was injured early in preseason camp last year, ruled out for the season. We saw him around the team initially in a scooter and a walking boot. And by the end of the 2023 season, he was able to stand on his 2 feet. But James Franklin saying has not been able to work his way all the way back to the field. They liked a lot of what they've gotten out of him in the classroom, in the training room. Everybody really enjoys the young man, but they really don't have a lot to go off of aside from what they recruited him on. And so this is a figure that I don't know what he can do this year. It's a lot to ask coming off of an serious injury. I'm sure there's a lot of physical and mental rust that he's going to have to break off or knock off and work his way back to form. So I don't know if it comes to fruition for Alonzo Ford in 2024 because there is a ton of defensive tackle presence. The only guy they lost on scholarship is Jordan Vandenberg. They brought in like 4 freshmen at the position. They've got 3 or 4 seniors there, but there's going to be a significant exodus at this position after the season. And so Alonzo Ford is a guy to monitor here in the coming months to see if he can make some noise. But I think maybe more long-term because of just the circumstances at the position and with him personally. But just a bit of an update there. It's a guy that hadn't really been referenced all that much since he was out of sight, out of mind last year. But that's where things stand with him. Daniel, anything else to tack on before we say goodbye and get ready to preview the blue-white game with our next episode?
One thing that popped up into my head while we were talking about Terry Smith is that both AJ Harris and Jalen Kimber spoke super, super highly of him. AJ Harris said that Smith was genuine during the recruiting process, and that when Harris told Penn State that it wasn't going their way initially, that Terry Smith was very gracious about it, very understanding, and that's something that really stuck with Harris. Last week, Jalen Kimber said the first time he was in the portal, he heard from Penn State. And so he had that relationship with Terry Smith from the recruiting process, from the first portal process. And that was something that was really strong, this second time around. So I think that that's something that, really speaks to the respect that Terry Smith has and kind of how he's viewed by cornerbacks around the country. And when you're talking about the portal, and James Franklin, I think, has been pretty explicit about how if someone doesn't pick Penn State in the recruiting process, they don't want to burn bridges because you don't know when you're going to re-recruit them again. And I think we've seen that a couple times. So I think that we always hear really good things about Terry Smith and a lot of really good feedback from players. And I think that it kind of speaks to how he's viewed, to hear that from guys coming into the program as well.
All right, Daniel, we're going to turn our attention over to recruiting with Tom Loy now, but appreciate the perspective. You and I and Mark Brennan will get back together. We'll huddle up for another episode before the blue-white game. We'll talk about what we're looking forward to most in Beaver Stadium. We'll throw out some predictions as well. That'll be on the episode 2 this week. But thanks for all the feedback from what you experienced on the practice field. It is a whirlwind out there, but we pack it in, and there's a lot of coverage over at Lions247.com.
Thanks, Tyler.
As promised, we have plenty to get to on the recruiting trail for Penn State. Saturday is going to be a big event for them with the blue-white game. That is something we'll preview a lot more on our next episode with Tyler Calvaruso. Give us the latest on that visitors list, who he's looking at specifically, where it could really move the meter with a bunch of prospects and their families coming to Beaver Stadium. But we get to national recruiting analyst Tom Loy of 24/7 Sports Network, and he's somebody that I know our readers are becoming increasingly familiar with over at Lions247.com. He's been chiming in with a lot of VIP updates across the different regions. Recently, earlier this year, was promoted to a national recruiting analyst. He's going to be heading down, moving with his family to Nashville, to our 24/7 Sports headquarters. As part of that change, you may have seen his work in the last decade, leading the charge at 24/7 Sports on the Notre Dame beat. But he's going to be doing all sorts of stuff for us nationally. He's already been doing that: camp coverage, prospect conversations, crystal ball picks, which we're going to get to in a second. But Tom, there is a little bit of an intro for you, but I know our readers and our listeners are going to become more and more familiar with your work in the coming weeks, months, and years.
Yeah, man, fired up to be here. Appreciate you bringing me on. Nothing but respect for Penn State fans and the site in general. I feel like over the years, Penn State fans have thought that I hated Penn State and all this kind of stuff. I mean, I lived in Pennsylvania. I lived on the eastern side of the state, the western side of the state. I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, so all this assumption that I don't like Penn State is just baffling to me, but nothing but respect for James Franklin, what they're doing. Love the direction of the program. So fired up to be here, man. And I'm excited to bring a lot more coverage to Lions 24/7.
We know you want to show that you're not a Penn State hater, but you're really overcompensating by putting in this crystal ball pick for one of the top running backs in the country, Tom. Let's talk about that. Just a moment or so before we sat down to record, you went public with this crystal ball pick. Alvin Henderson out of Alabama. He's the number 14 running back in our rankings at 24/7 Sports. He's number 223 overall in the top 24/7. Recently spent some time in State College. Seems to have hit it off with Jaywan Sider. What led you to make this move with a commitment now imminent?
Yeah, he's announcing his commitment on Thursday. Pretty excited to see what he does. I got a good relationship with Alvin. Met him multiple times, and just I feel really good about Penn State right now. I know the crystal ball for the majority of all sites is trending toward Auburn and keeping him in state, but I really think Jaywan Sider, James Franklin, and the guys, I think they get this one done. It's going to be a battle. I mean, even the fact that I threw the pick in here on Tuesday, he's still got Wednesday to go. And then obviously Thursday is the announcement. But beyond that, let's just be completely transparent. This is Alvin essentially naming a leader. Long way to go. But I do believe that in the end, he is picking a school based on relationships, based on connections, based on the big picture of life, and then also getting him to the next level. And I don't think there's a coach in America that he believes can get him ready and developed for the next level, and then Jawan Sider. So that connection is, in my opinion, playing difference maker in this role. And I guess I could be wrong, and there's a lot of misdirection and things going on behind the scenes that would prove my crystal ball prediction wrong. But if everything's cut and dry, and what I've learned over the last 48, 72 hours since that Penn State visit, I think Penn State gets it done, man.
You've got a couple pieces over at Lions247.com that people can check out, our VIP subscribers. One is breaking down the details of your crystal ball pick. The other is breaking down the other contenders and the timeline involved here with the Thursday decision now on the docket. This is a guy that when you go through the production at the high school level, it's pretty fascinating. As a freshman, he goes for 1,100 yards on the ground, 24 touchdowns. As a sophomore in 2022, 2,600 yards on just shy of 200 carries, 47 touchdowns to his credit. And then last year, 3,500 yards. That's 15.7 yards per carry, 61 touchdowns. He leads the nation with 68 total touchdowns, according to the write-up here from Andrew Ivins, our scouting director at 24/7 Sports. Yeah, that's pretty impressive stats. Regardless of who the competition is, he has really put a lot on film. What do you think about him as a running back recruit?
I'm a fan. He is rocked up. He is game ready day one. And I know for Penn State, they have him as a top of the board kind of guy, and they like him. Personally, I like him just as much as on the field as I do off the field. There's so much to like. He's a great kid. I feel like there's a lot of rumblings behind the scenes where people are like, staffs are getting frustrated because he can't make a decision. Like, relax. He's making the biggest, most difficult decision of his young life. And so he's going to have some uncertainty. He's going to be flip-flopping in his own mind. He's an impressionable kid, but in the end, phenomenal young man. I'm excited for him, excited to see what he does on Thursday. I'm excited to potentially be right on the crystal ball, but I'd prefer not to be wrong. But at the same point, just fired up for him. Someone, whether it's Auburn, Florida State, Miami, or Penn State, someone's going to get a great kid. And in my opinion, a difference maker at the next level. He's going to run for a lot of yards and score a lot of touchdowns in college.
And we've talked about it on this podcast before. Penn State already has a couple running backs on board, one from in-state, one down at Miami Central. Keandre Barker at Miami Central was previously in the state of Texas, previously in Arkansas. Now he's teamed up with Beckham Kritza down there. And then you've also got an in-state prospect in Tyke Hayes. And so the third guy on board, I think, speaks volumes about how Sider and the staff must feel about Alvin Henderson and his potential. We know that the running back position here at Penn State is going to undergo kind of a major overhaul going into 2025 if things go according to plan for Nick Singleton and Katron Allen as juniors, and it could really be an exciting competition to monitor moving forward. Tom, going back to Sider, you talked about that being such a key connection in this recruitment process thus far. We have heard it time and time again where Sider proves to be maybe a tipping point in a long-distance recruitment. I remember a guy like Noah Kane, who spent time in Texas and then at IMG Academy, was huge for Sider to be here. And the list goes on and on of guys he's been kind of, Florida guys, because Isaiah Holmes didn't work out for him, but he took a chance here as a four-star guy. Kevon Lee, another four-star prospect out of the state of Florida. What do you think stands out about Jawan Sider? You've been covering recruitings. You've been covering recruitments that have involved him for the past decade. Why does he keep getting it done?
Keeps it real. He's very genuine, honest. He's not a guy that's going to be negative recruiting schools. He just keeps it, as the kids say, 100. And that's really what he's focused on. He's focused on himself as a coach, as a developer, as a man, and also what Penn State can do for these young men if they decide to, play their ball and go to school and stay at college. So he's not all about the fluff. He's just about his business, and he wants to be a positive mentor and a father figure in their lives. And he wants to get these guys to the next level and make millions and millions of dollars, in the National Football League. So the fact that he just keeps it real and he's very genuine is the key. And he's a damn good ball coach too. So a lot going for him. And going back to Alvin Henderson, I just feel like the way he's recruited Alvin, really quietly behind the scenes, not a lot of fluff, not a lot of buzz, not asking for Alvin to tweet about Penn State or blow them up or anything like that. It's been very quiet, kind of moving in silence, if you will. And I think that he's playing in that father figure role for Alvin. And I think that's going to be the tipping point for Penn State.
Slater, year 6 now in Penn State. A lot of people didn't think he would stick around this long. I know James Franklin feels like he can be a head coach down the line if that's what he chooses to do, but Penn State reaping the benefits. We'll see if that happens again if Alvin Henderson comes to town. And Penn State's done a pretty good job lately of bringing some Alabama products to campus. You've got A.J. Harris, a former 5-star recruit who spent his freshman year at Georgia. He came via transfer. Harrison Wallace, a guy that a lot of people thought last preseason camp looked like the top receiver on this team, was injured for much of last year. He's from Alabama. Dakari Nelson, a second-year player, big-bodied safety. We've been wondering what his role could look like on defense. Also one of the former top players from Alabama. And then Malik McClain, a Florida State transfer last year. He spent high school in Alabama before moving to IMG Academy. Going to the quarterback position, Tom, this is a spot that certainly has changed the dynamics in the last week with Matt Zollers coming off the board to Missouri. Beckham Kritza has been in this class since November. Since he came on board, we've seen Penn State add Andy Kotelnicki as its offensive coordinator, and then kind of cement things with Danny O'Brien as its quarterbacks coach. So now that Zollers is off the board, I know you were covering that recruitment. We talked about it a lot last episode with Tyler Calvaruso. What do you make of Beckham Kritza? He's somebody that you have some in-person evaluation of. He's kind of a mystery man for a lot of us. I know a lot of our listeners and readers feel that way as well. And he kind of enters the spotlight more now that Matt Zollers isn't going to end up here in Happy Valley.
So I was able to get around Kritza at Battle Miami this offseason, and then again in Vegas at the Next One's event around the Super Bowl this year, which was a collection of 30-plus kids, the elite talent across the country. Great event, a lot of fun, very kind of Pro Bowl vibes. They had a great time. But there are a lot of people that have all these concerns and question marks about Kritza, but I love the talent. I think he's a guy that, has the best years ahead of him. He's got a clean, natural release. Real fluid kind of whippy motion that creates a ton of velocity. So, I think as he continues to grow, get coached up, I think the accuracy, the footwork, it's going to, develop and improve tremendously. And the game, it's going to slow down for him. He's just going to get more comfortable. But I'm actually really excited about his future at the next level and what he could do under Franklin, Coach K, Coach O'Brien, and Penn State overall. Man, I really like what they brought in with him. But then, obviously, if you wanted to talk a little bit more about the 24 class in general, I think Penn State's doing some really good things.
With Kritza, you mentioned a couple of in-person evaluations. There's a limited film. He had an abbreviated junior season because of some eligibility stuff after a transfer. Underclassmen, a lot of camps, but not a lot of high school work. He was here and there, it seemed. I know Andrew Ivins kind of referred to him as the journeyman of the 2025 quarterback class here nationally, but he's the guy that we're pretty focused in on. So when you talk about him being able to maybe have a full senior season here at a school like Miami Central, he's got Keandre Barker, who's a running back in the same Penn State class down there at Miami Central as well. He's got other targets he's working on to maybe bring with him to Happy Valley. But what kind of a launchpad moment could this potentially be for Kritza if he has some stability and gets it done, produces some quality film in a setting like Miami Central?
I think the stability is key. I cannot tell you that he is very happy being back at Miami Central. He's around his friends, family. This is a place he wants to be, especially during his senior season. And he feels comfortable and at home leading the 25 class for Penn State. So I think this is a big year for him. I think he's got a chance to really turn some heads and maybe quiet the critics that are out there, because like I said, there's a lot to like with this kid. He's not a guy that, they're going to obviously be patient with him. He's a guy that can, come in, he'll sit, he'll wait and bide his time. But I don't know. I just think that there's a lot of people that have a lot of question marks about him and really question his overall talent. But you get around him, kid's got moxie. He's kind of got that alpha mentality where he feels like he's, if not the best player in the room, one of the best players in the room. He's got great leadership qualities about him. So I'm really excited about him. I think he's a great kid. And I think he's a guy that can lead like I said, a strong 25 class currently committed to Penn State.
Kritza, currently 6'5", 180 plus pounds, ranked the number 42 overall quarterback nationally in 24/7 Sports rankings. And he will follow just outside of the top 100 overall last cycle, Ethan Grunkemeyer, 4-star Elite 11 finalist, someone who's really generated positive feedback through his first spring practice camp here at Penn State. He's the current true freshman. We'll see what awaits in that class next year. Kritz is a quarterback to know, certainly, but might there be a second quarterback? With Zollers off the board, the name that has kind of risen up to the forefront in that conversation on our board on this podcast a bit, Tom, is Malik Washington out of Maryland. Penn State and him have been on each other's radar for multiple years now, going back to a couple summers ago when he camped under Mike Yursic's direction. He's come back to campus a few times. I know he's got official visits locked in elsewhere, and the question certainly is, how much does Penn State want to invest in this pursuit and making him a potential second quarterback in this class? So my question to you is twofold here. What does the current recruiting landscape look like for Malik Washington, and how does Penn State potentially fit in moving forward? He's the number 14 quarterback, number 202 overall in our rankings at 24/7 Sports.
I'm going to, be completely honest. I don't want to sugarcoat anything. I think Maryland is probably the team to beat right now, as long as they continue to push. And from what I'm told, that's exactly what their plan is. I think they're doing a good job. Penn State is very much in contention. Virginia Tech as well. What is kind of interesting to watch, and I don't think it's going to happen, but if Texas A&M misses on Hassan Longstreet, the top 100 quarterback out of California, Washington is a guy they could turn the heat up on. But at this point, I feel good about Texas A&M getting it done with Longstreet. So maybe Auburn starts, making a run at Washington. There's a lot to like out of this kid. So if I'm Penn State, I'm all about competition. I do everything I can to get this one done and push really hard for Malik Washington, because there's a ton of with him, and talking to Andrew Ivins, our director of scouting, and Cooper Patagna, and a national analyst on the scouting side. They love him. And there's so much to like about this kid, both as a football player, a basketball player, as a kid in general. So if I'm Penn State, I'm pushing hard.
Are you getting any early word out there, just speaking with recruits, maybe about some buzz with Andy Kotelnicki and that move that Penn State made? He was the 24/7 Sports Offensive Coordinator of the Year last season at Kansas. He's someone that I know currently there's a feeling that he's going to be a significant upgrade as a play caller for Penn State, with the junior quarterback at Drew Aller, with two junior running backs in Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, who have been there before. And so a lot maybe primed up for success. Are you hearing much yet, or is this something where Penn State's got to go on the field this fall and maybe prove it to really start turning the recruits' attention?
I think that's going to help a great deal. But I remember talking to Beckham in Vegas about Coach K, and he was raving about him, man. You just you see him smile, you start seeing him light up talking about him, and just he clearly brings a lot to the room, and he has everybody, the vibes are high in that building. So he's clearly bringing a lot. Now, obviously, you got to move forward, spring ball into fall camp and onward, and really show what you're saying is going to be accurate on the field. So clearly everybody's buzzing about him, and there's a lot to like. So I think this was a good move for Penn State and James Franklin. And I think, like I said, I think it's going to pay off when it comes to recruiting.
All right, shifting away a bit from quarterback now, over to just generally the target board. And Tom, we've got a list here of guys that I know Penn State is involved with. We're going to get kind of an update, a fresh look at where they are in their process. And I wanted to begin today with Michael Carroll, an in-state offensive lineman that Penn State's been involved with for quite some time. They offered him last June when he came to a camp. His father, Michael Carroll Sr., was a linebacker for Penn State during the Joe Paterno era, and his offer sheet has blown up in a tremendous way since last summer. The complexion of his recruitment has really changed. There was a time maybe a year ago where you thought Penn State offers, they're going to be in the driver's seat for an in-state kid who's a legacy commit. Now it's certainly shaping up to be a battle, maybe a multi-pronged battle beyond the Big Ten. What can you tell us about this one? And I bring it up because of the timeliness here. He says he will be at Penn State June 14th through the 16th for an official visit. He put that out on Tuesday. No surprise, included the Nittany Lions on a shortened list of contenders on Monday.
I could see Penn State getting this one done. He's a legacy, as you said, strong ties to the Nittany Lions. I think it's somewhat of a two-team race now between them and Michigan. I know the Wolverines are optimistic. I talked about Michigan and their chances with Carroll last week on the football recruiting pod with Cooper and Ivins. We'll see how the official visits go, but this would be a really nice win. This is a guy that I'm really high on, so I like Carroll a lot.
A couple safeties that we've discussed quite a bit during this cycle, Jadon Blair, Kanoa Winston. We'll start with Blair out of Mount Tabor High School in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Big-bodied, 6'4" frame at the safety spot. Someone who's camped at Penn State. Poindexter has tried to develop that at the safety position, that relationship. Number 160 overall in our top 24/7 sports rankings. Where are things trending for Blair?
This one has been back and forth for such a long time. He was committed to Notre Dame, and then obviously he I'm sorry, not committed to Notre Dame. He was leaning towards Notre Dame when Chris O'Leary, the safeties coach, was there. Then O'Leary left for the NFL and then kind of went back to the drawing board. And I actually just removed my crystal ball pick because he went back to the drawing board. So I felt like I should as well. Then I was starting to think Penn State's naturally going to be the place he lands. But talking to sources connected to Michigan, there's a lot of buzz there. So I think it's a 3-team race. I think you're looking at Penn State, Notre Dame, and Michigan. Depending on who you talk with, and depending on the time of day, you're probably going to get a different perceived leader. But all three schools have optimism. He's fresh off a great multi-day visit to Notre Dame that was technically longer than an official visit. He's going to take official visits in June. So I'm hoping to catch up. We were supposed to catch up late last night, but I was on Alvin Henderson watch and just, covering that recruitment. So me and Jadon didn't get a chance to catch up. We'll do that again today. And then obviously look for a story at Lions 24/7 on, maybe Tuesday night, but more likely Wednesday.
That's back-to-back guys now where maybe it shapes up as a Michigan versus Penn State situation. I want to ask you now, April of 2024, coming off a national championship, but losing Jim Harbaugh, bunch of key pieces to that staff. Are the Wolverines in a fairly vulnerable spot in the recruiting trail, or do you feel like they've fortified things pretty well to take on the likes of Penn State and be able to win these head-to-head matchups if decisions come this spring, this summer?
Due to the fact that they made some key hires off the field, and I like what they did on the field in terms of like the on-field staff, I'm not as concerned as I was. I think that this is that Michigan staff is great at developing players, but I think that they took some flyers on guys that they actually turned and really developed that, maybe I didn't love as high school prospects, but really they took another level to their overall talent and ability once they got to Ann Arbor. So good on them for that. But I actually think they're doing a better job of evaluating and targeting guys early with this new staff. So I think they're trending in the right direction, but their 25 class may not necessarily reflect that now or down the road, because I think it's going to take some time to really show that they're not going to have a drop off and for guys to really buy in. So this is an opportunity for Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, all the Midwest schools, Michigan State, to really try to take advantage of that and the uncertainty in Ann Arbor. So I think that's why you're seeing Penn State trending with a lot of guys that maybe Michigan, coming off a national title, should probably be in that position for. So it'll be interesting, but I think that Penn State's, primed to take advantage of some uncertainty in Ann Arbor.
Like Jadon Blair, we've been hearing about Kanoa Winston for a long time. Top 50 overall prospect out of Gonzaga High School in Washington, D.C. He is the cousin of KJ Winston, who absolutely has all Big Ten potential now as a starting safety with Penn State in his junior year in 2024. But looking ahead, his cousin has a lot of options on the table. Penn State has consistently been a part of that conversation as the process has gone on. Can you tell us what's the latest with Kanoa Winston and where the Nittany Lions are maybe involved there?
Ton of options, like you said, but this is another one that I think is down to probably a 3-team race. This one's likely going to come down to Penn State, North Carolina, Ohio State. I think the Nittany Lions are doing a really good job here. All three are legitimate contenders. It's too early to call. I would have no comfort putting in a crystal ball at this point. So I like all three to really move the needle, continue trending in the right direction. And then obviously official visits will play out, but my gut kind of says North Carolina based on everything he says. But honestly, I guess if you had to force me to put a pick in, I'd say Penn State right now. But again, we're probably a little too premature because, are you really going to write off Ohio State at this point and what they're doing, especially on the back end of that defensive backfield? So kind of crazy what they're doing, but it depends. Does he want to join a loaded group of Ohio State, or does he want to kind of maybe start his own thing, maybe team up with Jadon Blair in the back end of Penn State? So a lot to like there for Penn State. We'll see how things moving forward.
Staying on the defensive side of the target board, one of the more impressive prospects to come to campus this spring was Max Granville, edge rusher out of Sugar Land, Texas, Fort Bend Christian Academy, top 200 overall prospect. His highlights are a lot of fun to watch from last fall, and he's been out and about. Clearly, if you got a Texas recruit making the trip to State College, it's someone who's taking it very seriously and getting their homework done on the recruiting trail. How much of a contender can the Nittany Lions become, and where else across the nation? I know Oklahoma is a team that a lot of people have looked at. Where else is he seriously casting a look towards?
Penn State is a sleeper here that I think people aren't talking enough about, but Texas A&M, Baylor, you mentioned Oklahoma, they're absolutely in it. USC, probably rounds out maybe the top 5 of heavy hitters involved. But Sooners might be the leader today, and that's probably where I would lean at this point. But don't sleep on the Nittany Lions here. His official visit is lined up, I believe, for May 31st. So they get an early crack at him. We'll see what happens. I mean, we all know, man, and I've been there. It's probably the best game day atmosphere I've ever been a part of. I was there for a whiteout game, so against Ohio State. So if you get an early crack at Granville in May, you already had him on campus once. If you can get him back in the fall, could be a game changer for him.
Yeah, stepping stones, right? In a recruitment like that when you're working from long distance. And then additionally, over in New Jersey, there's a top 24/7 cornerback for us to get into, and Jamir Joseph out of St. Joe's Regional. He's the number 22 cornerback in the country. A lot to like about his recruitment from in terms of options, coast to coast, Stanford to Penn State, Notre Dame in between. Jamir Joseph, is he a guy that you would expect to take this pretty deep? And is Penn State a team that is in a position to last the distance with him?
It's hard not to like Penn State at this point. I talked to some sources probably a month ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, about where they stood with Penn State, where Joseph stood with Penn State, and they feel confident. So I know Notre Dame, Stanford, and a few others are battling, but I know that the Lions staff feels good about where things stand. I like where they stand, but you know, when you're visiting schools like Stanford, those guys always seem to land guys that you don't really expect. They go out there, the academics, everything kind of sets up really well. Obviously, Notre Dame's going to be a contender there, but if I had to pick today, I like Penn State.
Stanford can be a tricky one, and we saw one of the top in-state offensive linemen from this 2025 cycle, Josh Williams, make that move and end up in that class with Stanford in that cycle after a few visits to Penn State. Let's get to the wide receiver spot because we got a few names here, including one who just ended a commitment fairly recently to a new Big Ten program. We'll begin in New Jersey, where we just were with Jameer Johnson, and go with Quincy Porter, top 10 receiver out of Bergen Catholic. Recently got over to Penn State. There's a lot of questions, Tom, I'm sure you're aware of in terms of what Marcus Hagans can accomplish here at Penn State. It wasn't a great year one for the receiver room in the offense. We're still waiting to see some of the young players emerge. This is a huge year for Hagans to prove a lot in the field, but also on the recruiting trail, bringing in talent. Porter, a big fish, maybe the biggest fish in the pond for them at receiver. Where is his recruitment heading?
Quincy would be a massive pickup for Penn State, but I'm kind of leaning towards Michigan right now. I'd probably take them over the field, but Penn State is right there neck and neck. I'd probably consider that the top two. Both are doing a very good job. Florida State's an intriguing option for him. He likes it a lot. I'm curious to see if Mike Norvell continues to push the right buttons there. Official visits are 100% going to play the biggest role here. Big on relationships, big on connections. But man, that would be a huge win because, like I said, I think Michigan's probably the team to beat right now. But maybe a safer bet would be Penn State right now. So we'll see. Time will tell.
Down in Florida, Cortez Mills out of Homestead High School is a 4-star, top 24/7 receiver. Again, Penn State aiming high at this position. It's been a common theme that Tyler Calvaruso has discussed in the podcast. A lot of really impressive names, impressive prospect profiles. We'll see who Penn State can pull in. We've seen them go down to Florida and bring in receivers in the past, including the 4-star variety. What makes Cortez Mills a special prospect at this position, a top 20 level prospect? And how might Penn State be situating itself to remain a part of this conversation?
I love Cortez Mills, man. One of my favorite receivers this cycle, one of my favorite recruits to deal with. I mean, this guy is a nightmare for defensive backs on 50-50 balls. He has made some incredible catches, some that I've gotten on camera when I was at Battle New Orleans, I think, where he was really shining and showing what he can do. I mean, he is an incredible talent. He may not have elite measurables or traits, but I'm not sure if there was a ball in the air that I would take anybody over Cortez to come down with it. So special talent, great kid. I think it's going to be tough for Penn State to win that matchup against some of the others like Miami, Nebraska, and Clemson. I like Miami. My crystal ball's on the Hurricanes. They get the last visit, which should be key. In the end, I see him sticking in South Florida and playing for the hometown team.
We saw Khalik Lockett make a trip up here to State College last summer. Really impressed on the camp circuit, and then got an offer from Penn State. Lo and behold, he ends up skyrocketing in rankings, ends up being the number 2 wide receiver right now, working towards the end of his junior year. 6'2", 175 pounds out of Texas. The last couple of receivers here we talk about are from the Lone Star State. The number 3 player in Texas, the number 11 player in the country, but he's on this list. Is this a pie in the sky conversation, or does Penn State have some kind of staying power with this recruitment?
He took the visit and raved about it to national analyst Mike Roach, who does a phenomenal job covering the Texas area and region for 24/7 Sports. And we talked about this on the podcast with Cooper and Ivins. I don't like Ivins was like offended. I just don't see it happening for Penn State. I would love it. I would love the fit. I think it's a great opportunity for him to come in, play early, play a ton, and make an impact as a true freshman. But in the end, I just think it's going to be really difficult for Penn State to pry him away from the Lone Star State, especially with Texas being all over him. Others in play, you got LSU, Florida State. I just can't see the Nittany Lions getting this one done. If I had to make a pick, I'd probably lean towards the Longhorns. But man, Lockett's an outstanding prospect, and Penn State's going to do everything they can. Again, this is a guy that the longer he goes with his process, if he can come back for an official visit as well as maybe a game day trip in the fall, all bets are off.
One more receiver to get to down there in Texas. And this is an interesting one because he recently backed off his verbal commitment to the Oregon Ducks, who are a newcomer in the Big Ten in 2024, out of Weiss High School in Pflugerville, Texas. Number 182 on our top 24/7, number 16 at wide receiver, Adrian Wilson. And I know right off the cuff, when he separated himself from Oregon and kind of reopened things, Penn State was one of those schools that surfaced almost immediately.
That was immediately once he decommitted from Oregon. That was the school I talked about. So if Penn State continues to push and they like him and they connect with him, and I could see the former Oregon commit in the class. I think the staff is doing a lot of quality work here behind the scenes, and they're treating him like a priority, which is something that I'm not sure the Oregon staff was doing a great job of, which kind of led to them parting ways with him and vice versa. So I said it the day he decommitted, keep an eye on Penn State. I still feel that way. The staff is doing a good job there. They're connecting, pushing the right buttons, man. And there's going to be some schools in the, Texas area, in that region that are going to make it tough on Penn State. But he told me when we spoke at Battle Houston that Penn State was coming hard after him and pushing for him and doing probably the best job, outside of obviously a team he highlighted where he was committed at Oregon. So keep an eye on Penn State, man. That would be a great pickup. Love this kid. Great talent. His releases are next level off the line of scrimmage. I think that he would do really well with a guy like Lyric Samuel, a guy that I think is pretty underrated, currently committed to Penn State.
Well, Texas, Florida, New Jersey, the receivers are wanted commodity for Penn State. They're looking near and far for them, and we'll see how it comes to fruition on this target board. As I said, a lot more recruiting to discuss in our second episode this week with Tyler Calvaruso. We'll specifically focus in on the blue-white weekend, the blue-white game event for recruiting and what it means for the Nittany Lions, who's going to be on campus and who might be on commitment watch as well. But for now, really appreciate the insight, Tom. We'll get you back on the podcast again down the line. Really happy to have you contributing to Lions 24/7 a bunch as our national recruiting analyst with a great recruiting team at 24/7 Sports. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good, Tyler. I appreciate it, man.
All right. Good stuff from Tom. Before him, we broke down the latest from the Penn State practice field with Daniel Gallen. A lot to look ahead to on episode number 2 this week as we give our blue-white game preview. We'll get some MVP picks, talk about some new players to watch, and detail what you need to be watching for during practice number 15 on the spring practice schedule for these Nittany Lions. For now, stepping aside, I am Tyler Donahue. We'll be back with another episode of the Lions